We focused a lot on climate change because climate change has the ability to compromise water security, and that's both in terms of water quantity, not getting enough drinking water if there's drought, or if there are floods, then it might also compromise the quality of the drinking water as well. And so our focus with the water quality and in terms of drinking water security was on pathogens in particular, and the way that they are transported from the catchment into the lake, in the case that we looked at, Lake Wivenhoe, and then into the mid-Brisbane River, and then ultimately into the water treatment plant offtake at Mount Crosby. It produced a coupled model assessment. The first of those was to look at climate change, and we used models of climate change to be able to link to the lake model, which was a complex three-dimensional model of the lake processes, the way that water is transported and mixed within the Lake Wivenhoe, and from there going into the mid-Brisbane River, and the mid-Brisbane River is also impacted by catchments that come in below Lake Wivenhoe Dam, and they were particularly important in terms of delivery of pathogens into the lower mid-Brisbane River. Seqwater, of course, delivers water to many thousands of people in the southeast Queensland region, and they were particularly interested in Lake Wivenhoe being the largest dam that supplies water to the region, and were concerned about the impact of future droughts and floods on the water quality of Lake Wivenhoe. Yeah, we had what we'd call a model train or multi-model assessment. That is, that the climate change models fed into a catchment model as well as a lake model to be able to indicate what the future climate was. From there, the lake model fed into a river model, still using the same climatic conditions of future climate change. And so we compare basically a sort of baseline case, which is current climate, and a future case at some time in the future of what the climate is projected to be. And so that future climate will have a different rainfall, it'll have different temperature, and those impact not just the water quantity, but also the water quality. Some of the key learnings were that Lake Wivenhoe is acting as an enormous asset for water security for Brisbane or for southeast Queensland. That is, that the water that comes in carries sediment, it carries nutrients, and it carries pathogens as well. In Lake Wivenhoe, those pathogens in particular sediment out. And so by the time the water gets to the dam wall, unless it is a major flood, those pathogens are diminished to very small levels. The major problem, however, occurs in the mid-Brisbane River because there's a lot of uncontrolled catchments feeding into the mid-Brisbane, Lockyer catchment, Laidley catchment as examples, and many of the pathogens are actually coming from those catchments. And unlike Lake Wivenhoe, there's no dam that actually protects the source water from the pathogens that are entering from those catchments. So they're the really critical point in terms of water treatment, that it's relatively easy for those pathogens to be transported through to the Mount Crosby intake, and from there to cause problems with water treatment. And obviously what happens is that it costs a lot of money to treat the water. A lot of chemicals are added, there's a lot of processes involved. Trying to reduce those costs is really critical, and we can do that by working further up into the catchment. This is at the sort of far end of some very complex models that are pieced together, but when you see the ability to be able to visualise and simulate what is actually occurring, particularly during these flood events, I think it's very useful to, not just to scientists like ourselves, but also communities and other groups, to be able to communicate and visually to be able to see the propagation of the water and the pathogens through into the downstream regions.